Whether I'm talking to somebody in India, in Western Africa, in the Americas, or in Europe, we all have the same sort of challenges, and a lot of them are all the same emotional challenges, irrespective of culture. So what I do is I take people back to basics around emotional intelligence and talk to them about this awareness and this action and behavior, build up the components of emotional intelligence, and then I hand it over to them and say to them, how does this differ and what is the impact of this within your culture? And most people come back with very, very, very similar answers.
Managing a global team is complex, but Deel makes it simpler with payroll, HR, IT, and compliance all in one place. That's why over 35,000 businesses trust Deel to hire, pay, and manage teams worldwide. See how Deel works at DEEL.com/NICKDAY. That's Deel.com/NickDay. Deel, your forever people platform. Welcome back to the HR L&D Podcast, the show where we explore the big ideas that are shaping the future of human resources, people performance, and of course, workplace culture. My name is Nick Day. I'm the CEO of JGA Recruitment. We're a specialist human resources recruiter operating globally, and I'm also your host of this show. And today's guest is Dr. Robin Hills, a global expert in emotional intelligence and the founder of EI for Change. He's helped over 500,000 people in 195 countries to build emotional intelligence through his award-winning courses. And of course, he's spoken at places like Harvard, he's authored multiple books, and he recently received an honorary doctorate in psychology. To give some reference here, in 2024 alone, Robin was named Best Transformative EI Coach. He was recognized as one of the men leaders to look up to, and his company, EI for Change, was awarded International Impact Company of the Year, which is why today I'm really excited because we're going to be exploring some central themes such as why EQ still beats AI. We're talking a lot about AI at the moment. How to build resilience as a leader, something all of our listeners, I'm sure, can benefit from. And of course, the tools that every HR professional needs if they really want to embed successful EQ into workplace culture. So without further ado, Dr. Robin Hills, welcome to the HR L&D Podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show, Nick. It's a great honor to be here. It's a great show. So thank you for having me on here. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
You and me both. Well, let's start then with my first question. I think you know what might be coming. But my first question I ask all of my guests, which is this: what do the words human resources mean to you?
Well, look, to really unpick this and to make it a lot more relevant to what we're talking about, what is an organization? Is it a logo? Is it a building? Is it a stock market share price? What is an organization? To really answer the question, an organization is made up of a network of people. It's a network of people that work within the organization, and it's a network of people outside of the organization, stakeholders, suppliers, customers, clients, people that have an impact on the company and who are impacted by the way in which the company operates. So human resources to me are the resources that make the organizations work. And what makes the organization work is people, the humans within the network. And obviously, internal resources are a lot easier to manage than external resources. So human resources is all about putting the resources of the organization to work and to improve performance.
Brilliant. Well, a fantastic place to start. It reminds me of a show I did recently with Jeff Dewing, who said to me that, Nick, and I asked about the importance of corporate values. And he said, Nick, companies can't have values. They're not a thing. It's the people within the company that have values and culture. And I'm sure we're going to get into that, but your response reminded me very much of his response. Listen, let's start with EQ to begin with, because I'm a recruiter. I've seen that emotional intelligence has absolutely become a central skill that employers are looking to recruit. And it's really shifted a lot, certainly as we move into 2025. So why has EQ become such a central skill for professionals this year?
Well, let me just define what emotional intelligence is and then separate it out from EQ, just so that our listeners know what we're talking about. Emotional intelligence is being smart with your feelings. It's working with your emotions in an intelligent way to make the most appropriate decisions and to build up authentic relationships, and to do so in order to take action. So it links very much to your question about what is human resources. So that's what emotional intelligence is. How can we get the people to work intelligently with their emotions to make the most appropriate decisions and to build up the authentic relationships within the network in order to take action and improve performance? Now, a lot of people will talk about EI and EQ, and for me, the two are completely different. EQ is emotional quotient. It's like IQ. It's those aspects of the intelligence that can be measured. And there are some wonderful tools. You're very familiar with these, Nick. You will be very familiar with these, and so will your listeners. They are the recruitment psychometrics and assessments that can give some great insights into people to understand their behavior and to understand certain aspects of their personality and indeed their emotional intelligence to help you to make these better decisions. That is EQ. EI goes beyond EQ. So it's looking at attitude, it's looking at biases, it's looking at things that are unconscious, it's looking at preferences, it's looking at how we use those. So it encompasses a little bit more than pure EQ. But let's stick with EQ because that is the measurable component that we're talking about when we're talking within HR, within L&D, and within recruitment.
Well, I'm delighted that you've given me that clarification, because I was definitely using them interchangeably as if they were one and the same thing. So I've learned something already on this show. So that's a really handy and helpful start to frame the conversation. Let's start then with some of the workplace challenges for our listeners, because how is emotional, well, I've got to be careful which term I use now, but I think emotional intelligence is the right one, but correct me if I'm wrong. How is emotional intelligence helping to solve some of the workplace challenges that maybe many of our listeners are confronting at the moment in the workplace?
Well, to go back to your question, which I didn't fully answer previously around AI and the impact that it's having on recruitment, I think it's important to actually say that what emotional intelligence gives us as humans within organizations is the ability to be entrepreneurial, to make strategic decisions, and to affect judgment, to take risks, and to do things slightly differently than what we've done previously to see if it works. If it works, great, we build upon it. If it doesn't work, we learn from it, don't do it again, build upon it, and do something differently. Now, the other component of emotional intelligence, which is absolutely vital moving forward and is going to separate us well from artificial intelligence in the short term and indeed the long term, is empathy. It's understanding things from different, it's understanding things from other people's perspectives. You don't necessarily have to agree with what they're thinking. You don't have to agree with what they're feeling. You just have to understand and work with them to give them what they need. And by so doing, you motivate them.
It's interesting because there are just an infinite number of variables that come into any kind of problem-solving situation, from the childhood things that we were exposed to the way we were parented, to nurture, to nature. And of course, there's all those variables that must make it very complex. But you raised something really interesting, and that's the word empathy. So she won't thank me for saying this. My wife, for example, will say she has very high emotional intelligence because she's very empathetic. And of course, I want to be clear here that are they these terms, should they be used interchangeably like that? Are they very different? How does emotional intelligence, I guess, differ from simply being empathetic or emotionally aware?
Well, awareness is a key component of emotional intelligence, but to be truly emotionally intelligent, you need to be aware of yourself to start with. So it's all about self awareness. And then you can have an awareness of other people. You can have that awareness through empathy. But then the other components of emotional intelligence are around acting and behaving. So you may have this awareness, your awareness of yourself and your awareness of other people, but that's great. If you don't do anything with it, you're not being emotionally intelligent.
Good
So
point.
it's the way in which you act and behave. And internally, it's the choices that you make around working with your emotions. So it's how do you regulate your emotions? If you are starting to feel quite intensely angry, how do you express that? How do you utilize that in a constructive way? How do you utilize it to maintain the relationship, keep it intact, and help other people to understand that what they've done is transgressing one of your core values? And the way in which you do that is by taking action and behaving in certain ways through communication skills. So it's utilizing your ability to interact with other people through communication, which involves things like active listening, utilizing the right words, being political, small p and indeed big P, but more so within organizations. It's around the political culture within the organization. So it's having an understanding of culture, it's having an understanding of leadership and your leadership skills and how that impacts upon your communication. So as you said, Nick, this is very, very complicated. And it's a lot harder than just saying, oh, I'm emotionally intelligent. Now, I don't want to take anything away from your wife because I don't know her. So I'm going to have to make the assumption that she
I'm
tells you
thinking,
she's emotionally
I've
intelligent.
probably
And she is.
simplified her slightly here in the way she put it, but I'm learning in every response you give. I think the complexity really comes through. And I think one thing that the HR people that listen to the show have had to be in is they really need to build their resilience under significant pressure. They're often plate spinning. So with those individuals where you need to build resilience, what are some of the sort of common challenges that people face when they are trying to, or they're faced with adversity, or they're faced with stress, or they need to really hone into that level of resilience in order to perform?
Well, again, resilience is an incredibly complex topic.
I'm not making this
Um,
easy for you.
Well, no, you're actually asking me the right questions around my specialist topic. So the thing is, I don't want people to go away and think, oh, yeah, resilience is just simply about bouncing back. It's not. It's about having an understanding of reality and having an acceptance of reality. You might not like it, but just understand that, hey, this is the situation we find ourselves in. Um, this is the reality of the situation. So, what am I focused on doing? Why am I here? What is the meaning that I'm giving to everything that I'm doing? So, what are my values? What am I striving to achieve here? And then it's having the flexibility and the creativity to adapt around the situations, put things to different uses, and trying different things in different ways to move forward from the adverse situation. Things may not get better, but what you're trying to do is to make things, stop things getting any worse and coming to terms with it. So as you come through an adverse situation, as you come through a stressful situation, you're learning through that process. And because you're becoming a better human being because of it, not despite it, you actually become more resilient and you're not bouncing. What you're actually doing is you're actually growing and you're actually developing and you're actually becoming more capable of dealing with adverse situations as they unfold.
I'd love to know because I'm finding the whole conversation really fascinating. It kind of links into something that I'm quite passionate about generally as a host here, which is stoicism. And one of the things that I like to tell myself if I'm struggling is control what I can, cope with what I can't, and sort of concentrate on what's important. And the idea that this too shall pass, kind of little mantras I'll give myself if I'm struggling. But obviously, you work with people. You've created courses with people all over the world. I think I mentioned you trained over 500,000 people in 195 countries. So are there any examples or case studies where you've been able to support or someone's worked with someone where you've really seen a fantastic response or a change in direction in terms of the output as a result of some of the work you've been doing with your clients?
Well, yes, I won't mention any names because I think that would be
Of course.
unfair. But I did have somebody who contacted me who'd taken one of my online courses, and he said to me, I'm very emotionally intelligent, and I'd like to have an emotional intelligence assessment, please. Can I take one of the emotional intelligence assessments that you're qualified in? And we can work around that and help me to understand how to be even better with my emotional intelligence. So I said to him, okay, let's use the EQI 2.0. It's the one that's been developed by Ruth von Baron and is globally recognized and is probably the most scientifically validated and reliable assessment of emotional intelligence. So I put him through the assessment and he came back with, or his results came back. And quite honestly, they were the worst, lowest emotional intelligence scores that I have ever seen in anybody. So I actually had to go back to my tutor on the EQI 2.0 and say, look, this is what I've got. Help. Have you ever seen it before? And he said to me, no, Robin, I haven't seen this before. So I thought, okay, right, back to basics here, back to coaching, back to helping the person to understand what their scores are and what they mean. Well, the young lad was extremely frustrated, annoyed, and very angry at the end of the coaching session because it just wasn't what he'd expected. And I actually suspected that that was the way he was going to behave according to the scores
Of
and
course.
indeed
Sure.
the definition of emotional intelligence that you gave me. So I just left it with him. I said, okay, right, well, this is what it is. Go away, reflect on it, and think about it. And he came back about 24, 48 hours later with an email saying that he was still incredibly annoyed and he didn't want to take it any further. He felt that it really was a problem. The EQI 2.0 obviously wasn't as good as what he thought it was. And I thought, okay, right. Well, I responded in a very positive, affirmative way to his email without agreeing with it. And just left it. And then a couple of months later, I got an email out the blue from him, and he said, I have been thinking about what you've said. I'd like to retake the EQI 2.0 and see whether there have been any changes, because I've been making a few changes around the way in which I interact with people. So he retook the EQI 2.0, and whilst the scores still weren't brilliant, he had made some major improvements that I was actually able to congratulate him on and to help him in terms of moving forward around his emotional intelligence. To me, that was a remarkable success. I didn't expect it at all, but that's the power of the EQI 2.0, and it's also the power of coaching.
I love it because it's a great example as well of how when we let things percolate a little bit and just settle in and we start to self-reflect. He's obviously done some of that self-reflective work over time and questioned some of his actions or reactions in the moment and gone, actually, maybe there is an element here where the test was correct. And he's obviously had the chance to reflect and improve before coming back, which I think is a great example. Something I'm really interested in, and I mentioned the stoic side, which is probably a simplified version of things that I enjoy, but I'm interested from your perspective how you go about researching in a way that develops the subject. Because if we think about emotional intelligence, it's, you can find a dictionary definition potentially, but you take it to a whole new level. Even in this conversation, you're firing off insights for me where I'm going, okay, but I need to relook at some things that I thought I knew and look at them in a slightly different way. So how do you start that path for you? Where does your research start? Where does it potentially end? And what are you hoping to achieve? Attention payroll leaders. If you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favourite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet.
Well, it's a very, very interesting question. I'm continually reading, I'm continually talking to people, I'm continually asking myself questions and challenging myself. Have I got this right? Is my understanding right? Can I think about this or do things better? And again, let me give you another example. This morning, I got a review from one of my courses from somebody who was saying that the points that I had been making on neurodiversity in one of the courses were outdated. And I was using language that really didn't reflect pure neurodiversity. And I thought, that's a very, very interesting comment. I didn't understand it, and I didn't know what I had done that was problematic, particularly to this individual. So I went back to him and I said to him, look, I'm really pleased that you've given me this insight and feedback. Can you let me know where I'm not using the right level of language? And he came back to me and he said, well, he's on the autistic spectrum, and some of the terminology has changed recently. And some of the language that I was using was assumptive around what a normal person is. And so I then used AI as a tool. So I took a transcript from a couple of my videos and I ran it through AI and I said to them, can you just explain to me where I'm not using appropriate language around neurodiversity? And it came back with 2 or 3 examples, 2 or 3 sentences that just needed slightly rephrasing. It did actually say, oh, this is a very good, very well written transcript. The video really is covering everything and trying to do it appropriately. But here are a couple of sentences where you could just rephrase it. And I thought, yeah, that's a good point. And then the other point that the person had made to me in the communication that I'd had with him is he said, in terms of some of the bits of body language that I'd been talking about, particularly around eye movements and body posture, they are not appropriate in somebody who is neurodiverse, particularly if they are on the autistic spectrum. People do not like to look directly at people when they're talking, and indeed some of their body language might be a little bit evasive at times. So helping people to understand that may be down to neurodiversity and not down to a behavioral or personality trait, again, is a very, very good point. So what I need to do is to go away, do a bit more research, do a bit more reading, and then redefine some of my videos within my courses in order just to acknowledge these points, not necessarily go into a lot of detail, just to acknowledge that there are different considerations for different people. We're all individuals. So what we've got to do in order to be emotionally intelligent and in order to empathize is just to accept that our view of the world might not be everybody else's view. The majority may share that view, but there's going to be a few people that don't, and we need to be fully inclusive of everybody. Great feedback. That happened today. So that's a great way of answering your question. And I'm continually looking out for great examples where I can go away and think, have I got this right? Do I need to do more? Can I do it better?
You see, it's an interesting response because it's a journey then that will never stop because you can never please everybody all of the time, and there has to be a chance or a level of review or acceptance for you to know whatever video you put out there is going to offend somebody somewhere in some way. And is a level of acceptance that we all need to come to sometimes when we're delivering that kind of content, whether it's about emotional intelligence or anything else. I'm sure someone listening to this podcast somewhere, would be offended by something within it. I don't know what that is, but we try and keep it as as accessible as possible. And I think what's important from your response, though, is the willingness to continue to learn and to strive to continually improve. And I think that relates to something you mentioned right at the start of the show, when you were excited about why the human aspect of emotional intelligence is so different to what AI might be able to achieve right at the start. So with that in mind, do you think AI, as it continues to improve at a rapid pace, the idea that we're going to hit the place of singularity potentially in 2030, when AI is potentially a million times more intelligent than humans, as they say in the headlines, can ever actually replicate emotional intelligence, or do you think it's something that can just never will never quite get there?
No, I honestly believe it will never quite get there. Yeah, come 2030, it may be far more cognitively and rationally intelligent than human beings, but it can never replicate a human's emotions because it doesn't possess what you and I and all your listeners have got, and that's a human brain. So let's unpick this and let's make it a lot more understandable for people. And I'm going to give you some examples that I've not shared with anybody before, just simply because, again, it's come out of the reading and the research and the work that I've been doing fairly recently. What is it that AI cannot do? Well, AI cannot empathize because it doesn't understand human emotions. It doesn't understand the breadth of human emotions. There's a lot of research going on into affective computing, that's emotional computing. And we will get a palimpsest, a vague but very good impression of human emotions from computers. But where it's going to break down and where it falls over at the moment, and a lot of your listeners in America won't realize this. Again, if we go back to this question of diversity, equality, and inclusion, all of the AI responses are incredibly American. So here am I sitting in the United Kingdom. I use the tool. I find it fascinating and a very, very valuable tool, but I've got to translate it into English, England English. So imagine if you're utilizing AI and you're in India or you're in Africa and English is your second language. It's giving you a completely different interpretation. So if it's able to use a local language, is it capable of using the dialect? Does it understand the nuances? That's going to be incredibly complicated. It will learn these nuances and it will learn these differences over time, but it's going to take time. It's going to take a long time. And the other area where the artificial intelligence, the robots, will never be able to work and replicate is in sign language for deaf people. If you watch some of these interpreters, they've got 5 different channels. They use all of their body. Ooh, I've knocked the microphone. They use all of their body and they use facial expressions and they build emotions into the way in which they talk. And they use the spatial awareness in order to convey their messages. Now, I can do that very easily. You can do it, Nick. I can't do it appropriately because I'm not trained in sign language. But we've got the ability through the muscles in our body to be able to deliver this communication through sign language if we've been trained. But AI will never be able to do that. AI struggles to walk up the stairs.
I think it's really. I love this kind of subject area. I think the idea to contextualize nuance is where AI is really struggles, and I think you're absolutely right. AI might be able to state a perfectly written response, but be able to state something doesn't mean that you feel it, and that doesn't really mean you understand or can contextualize it the way a human can. I think you gave some really good sign language one's a really interesting one. My niece is trained in Makaton and she delivers. Translates, I think would be the right word, famous pop songs into sign language for the deaf, and she does that on YouTube very successfully. So I've had some experience of watching it and watching her. Can't imagine any AI trying to replicate what she does. It's phenomenal to see, and I get all the kind of nuances and things you've just mentioned, and bringing that to life is a good example. I want to take it a slightly different direction, and this is because this is something I'm really passionate about. So I have a separate podcast to this show called the Mindful Paths Podcast, which is all about mindfulness. And I know that you have a free mindfulness course. I know it's a key part of what the emotional strength and index and things that you deliver and through your course habits and things like that. So I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about mindfulness and emotional mastery and your experience in that field.
Yeah, yes, and I know it's a difficult topic to talk with somebody as experienced as you around mindfulness, Nick, and many of your listeners will already know this. But mindfulness is not about going into a trance and saying and sitting in the corner cross-legged, smoking and with joss sticks all around you. I still come across that perception of mindfulness out there in the big wide world. Mindfulness is about being mindful. It's being very much in the present moment. It's reducing all the distractions that can take us away from being present in the present moment and making sure that we've got situational awareness. Now, when I'm talking to many senior leaders, I find a lot of them really struggle with that concept. Verbally, they will say to me, "Oh, yes, I get this. Yes, I'm very mindful when I'm at work." And then when they're talking to me, they're busy flicking on their mobile phone, or they're sitting at the back of the room texting somebody, or they're looking at the internet on something totally irrelevant around what we're talking about. That is not being mindful. Where's my mobile phone at the moment? It's in another room and I've switched it off because at the moment I'm mindfully talking to Nick Day on the HR and L&D podcast. So that's where my mindfulness is taking me. It's also about learning to be in the present moment by making the right choices and by utilizing your body in an appropriate way to engage with the environment, both psychologically and physiologically. So again, another complex answer, layering on complexity around a very simple, seemingly simple topic.
It is. No, you've given a very articulate response. I think it's you mentioned it at the beginning of the show as well. A lot of mindfulness is around awareness, being aware of where you are in the moment and not being distracted by these devices. My co-host would have loved your response, by the way. He never has his mobile anywhere near us when we record our podcast, and he tells me off for not being so disciplined. But you're absolutely right. I think I'll have to share this response with him. But that's the Mindful Path show. If anyone's interested in checking that out, I'll put a link in the show notes. So really interesting to take this further then, because you've worked at a global scale and you mentioned a little bit with the AI answer there, some of the nuances that can be different across borders and in different dialects and different cultures, different locations. What surprised you most about teaching emotional intelligence and EQ when you consider those things at a global level?
I think I think the most surprising thing here, Nick, is that whether I'm talking to somebody in India, in Western Africa, in the Americas, or in Europe, and I've left out Australia and New Zealand, but them as well. But whenever I'm talking to anybody, we all have the same sort of challenges, and a lot of them are all the same emotional challenges, irrespective of culture. So what I do is I take people back to basics around emotional intelligence and talk to them about this awareness and this action and behavior, build up the components of emotional intelligence, and then I hand it over to them and say to them, how does this differ, and what is the impact of this within your culture? And most people come back with very, very, very similar answers. So yes, we can look at a Japanese culture and we can compare it with the American culture, and we can take the American culture and we can compare it with the Scandinavian cultures. There are differences, they're subtle differences, but in terms of emotional intelligence, the concepts and the ideas remain exactly the same.
Really interesting. I find it absolutely fascinating. So have you seen any sort of cultural patterns that link the two, or in the way that it's even taught in different countries? Are there again lots of similarities and any sort of striking differences, or are there any sort of cultural patterns that have emerged?
Well, I think the key to working within a different culture is to, we've already talked about it, to be genuine, to be with our core values, to go in with an open mind and go in with the intention of not offending anybody. So part of it is doing your homework before you go to a different culture, just to determine what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, and understand that, okay, you might get it wrong. Most people are going to be very, very, very forgiving. But if you set out to offend, you will. If you set out not to offend, then people, like I say, are going to be very, very forgiving. Let me take you back. Must be about 12 years ago. I was doing some work in Saudi Arabia, and I'd been talking about to the guys. They were bankers, about the workings of the brain and how the brain had changed and evolved over the last, well, many millennia. And one of the young lads took me aside a few days later and he said to me, "Oh, Robin, I've really enjoyed everything that you've been talking about, but we don't believe in the theory of evolution." And at that moment, I thought, oh dear, yes, slapped the side of my head. And it was just a very simple, genuine slip. That's part of what I believe in. That's part, well, it's not a case of believing it. It's a scientific fact, and there's a lot of evidence to support it. And it's not a theory, it happens. But when you're talking to people from other cultures who have a very, very, very strong religious aspect and output, it's a case of being tolerant and being accepting of that and being mindful of the words that you're using and the ideas that you put across. We can get it wrong. Why? Because we're human.
Yeah. Actually, it leads me to, you mentioned the word, offending someone. You gave a great example in Saudi Arabia there of where someone potentially could have been, or was offended by the theory of evolution in that context. I love the idea that nothing means anything apart from the meaning we give it. And I think there's an element of that as well. People are going to be offended because they're putting meaning on something, but if you change your view on that situation, the meaning can completely change. By the same definition as well, you and I have different cultures, different upbringings, different social economic backgrounds. All these different things are going to shape the people we become and shape the views or beliefs in that instance that we're going to have. And those beliefs can also change. And sometimes we need to reflect and be aware of what those beliefs are and whether they serve us or whether they don't, to know what meaning we decide to put upon it. And of course, we can change that meaning as well, which is really interesting. A friend of mine, actually my co-host on the show, said to me, "Nick, a belief is a lie surrounded by BS." And I was like, really interesting. Well, you can choose to have it or you can choose not to, but nothing means anything apart from the meaning you choose to give it. I wanted to see how that sits with the clients you're working with, because if you put in that situation and someone is offended, there has to be, I would argue, there has to be an element where that's because of the way they are seeing the world in that moment. And it's not for you to change the belief. It's not for them necessarily to be offended. It's that understanding that we need that reflection. But I could also appreciate that could be quite jarring, maybe sometimes in that work.
Yes. I mean, part of my live emotional intelligence courses really is to look at how people take in information and how they perceive situations. And I've got a range of very, very, very good examples that demonstrate this. And it pulls in the concept of situational awareness and mindfulness. And a lot of people, once they've been through this, end up questioning everything about that's everything around what's happening around them. They'll be saying to themselves, am I really seeing this? And that's good because it's helping people to understand that they will only view and see the world through their own eyes, their own senses. Um, as we supposedly have five senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Well, there are probably about 15 more senses that people completely overlook. Things like our relationship with time, the very fact that we have feelings or internal feelings like the feeling of being hungry or thirsty, or the feeling that we need to go to the toilet, the feeling that we're sleepy, all these sort of things, and they will impact upon the way in which we're interacting with the world. And we are very, very, very limited by our senses. My own senses of hearing is incredibly poor. I am actually quite deaf, which is one of the reasons why I wear headphones, so that I can actually hear what's being said. It's inside my head and not out with. But it's really understanding how you're engaging with the world, and appreciating that all you're seeing is a very, very, very limited view, which is one of the reasons why it's so important to keep open-minded and just to say, have I really understood this? Is there something that I'm missing here? Tell me, what is it that I've missed? What is it that you're seeing? What is it that you're feeling that I'm not? Very, very powerful leadership questions, but a lot of leaders find them incredibly difficult to ask because it adds into the conversation a level of vulnerability. I'm the all pervasive, all seeing leader here. I know I've been working in this area 10, 15, 20 years. There is nothing you could tell me that I don't already know. Sorry, that is not leadership. That's just being an idiot. What you need to do is to actually say, okay, I've got this experience. I'm still learning. What is it that you're seeing that I'm not?
Yeah, and a lot of, as you said, there's a lot of that results to leaving ego at the door. I was interested in you were saying about the other senses, because one of the ones I don't know if you'd have this in one of you in your 50. I don't know if you categorized all of them or not, but intuition, that
15,
feeling that of
15,
our,
1 5.
is that 15, 15? Does
Yeah,
intuition
yeah.
come in there, like our second brain, that feeling we get in our pits of our stomachs, as opposed to the outward feeling? Sometimes they can be in opposition, and we get that what we call that gut feel. I've got a gut feeling about this. From your analysis, would that come into a sense for you, or is that part of something else, or am I just talking outside of the realm?
I'm thinking through as you're saying it. Is it one of the senses? It is, but do we actually label it as a sense and say intuition? It's an internal feeling around what is right or what is wrong. We've got a neural network around our alimentary canal, around our gut system, and it feeds more information to the brain than what the brain feeds down to the gut. And obviously, it can't think in the same way that the brain does, but it's obviously providing some information for the brain. And what it provides is this um, a binary system of good and bad, right and wrong. And that will help us in terms of intuitively, this kind of gut feeling that I'm getting is telling me that this is a good idea, or perhaps I ought to not to do this on this occasion. So, yeah, let's add it into one of the 15 plus
Yes,
senses.
I
I
like that.
think what we've got to do is just to get away from this idea of five
Sure.
senses. People talk about a sixth sense, and that's where intuition comes in. But then there are lots and lots of other senses. Our sense of balance. like our sense of one thing being related to another. All of these are extra senses that are completely overlooked, that can't be covered with the traditional five senses.
Well, I sense I could speak to you for hours on this subject because I'm genuinely fascinated by all of it. If I'm being absolutely honest, but I want to find out and make sure we don't leave our listeners not knowing a little bit more about where they can access more of this wonderful information. So you've got a digital magazine, EI Matters. I think there's over 200,000 followers to that publication. So your work is widely read and received fantastically well already. But tell us a bit about the work you're doing now, where perhaps some of our guests, if they want to find out more, maybe they want to sign up to your newsletter or your publication, or just read some of your works. What are some of the places I can direct them?
Sure. Thank you, Nick. I can be found at ei4change.com. That's ei number 4change.com. There's a lot of free resources around emotional intelligence that your listeners can sign up for free. Go in there and fill your boots. You've mentioned EI Matters, eimatters.com. The edition changes every month, so come back and visit regularly, and you can see different articles written by different people. There's book review, there are quizzes, there are games on there are videos, there are podcasts on there that you can listen to. Go along and just enjoy yourself, and come back a few weeks later and all the material will have changed.
Fantastic. For those listening, just to be really clear, I will put all of these links in the show notes. You don't need to be busy scribbling them down. There'll be a link to the ei4change.com website. I'll put a link into Dr. Robert Hill's LinkedIn profile. There is a free book as well called Developing Your Emotional Intelligence, which you may want to check out. I'll put a link into that. And there's a free course, Working with Mindfulness. So all of those links will be in the show notes of this episode. So just click through on your favorite podcast provider and you'll be able to access those. No, indeed, if you're watching on YouTube, you can find it in the episode notes there as well. I just want to finish the show with three short, sharp questions, if I may, which will link to our HR L&D Vault. I have slightly catered these for to link towards emotional intelligence, so slight changes to my usual questions. But the first one is this: what's one piece of advice you would give to HR L&D leaders who are seeking to enhance emotional intelligence within their organizations?
2 words: be kind.
Love that. That's genuinely, and people will know if they've learned this. That's literally my mantra that I say to everyone in my team on a regular basis. Everyone is going through something. Just be kind. You don't know what it is always. Just be more kind. Love that. Love that. No, we could talk for hours. Okay, second, if you could share a moment in your career where emotional intelligence has had a really profound impact, either on you or on somebody else, what would it be?
Well, I think we've talked quite a few examples through today's show, so I'd encourage your listeners to go back and listen. I'm continually learning about emotional intelligence. Am I emotionally intelligent? Good question. If I answer no, why am I working in the field of emotional intelligence? If I answer yes, it's rather arrogant and self-conceited and suggests there's no room for improvement. So it depends. There are some times when I'll go into a situation and everything will work out wonderfully, and I'll come out of it and think, yeah, I got that right. And then there are going to be other times when I get it completely wrong. Why? I'm human like you are. So I screw up. I get it wrong at times. Um, I'm continually learn. I'm continually learning.
Perfect. And last but by no means least, and this is going to be a complex one and it's a bit of fun, but I don't think it's that easy. If emotional intelligence was a book, a movie, or a song, what would it be?
I would point you to The Lion King.
Okay. Why The Lion King? Tell me
There,
more.
Disney's Lion King. There is a wonderful scene in there where Rafiki, the mandrill, he refers to himself as a baboon, but being pedantic, he's not. He's a mandrill. He is questioning Simba, the teenage lion, around the decisions that he's made in his life and telling him he needs to change. And I think that scene for me actually epitomizes everything about self-awareness. It's a wonderful scene. So I think there's a lot of really great stuff within a lot of Disney films, and particularly The Lion King, around helping people go through change, deal with bereavement, go and live your life with reprobates, but turn it around and make something special of it. And I think there's some great examples within it.
Love that. You've made this an effortless interview. You've come back with some immediate responses. It's been an absolutely enlightening journey. So thank you ever so much, Dr. Robin Hills, for joining me today. Hopefully our listeners have really understood that emotional intelligence fuels everything from resilience to trust to performance, and it's a currency that we believe is going to outlast the machine. So we need to really get to grips with it. And of course, there are some wonderful resources at your website, eiforchange.com, where people can find out exactly how they can do that and where they can learn more and even potentially test themselves as well if they wish to do so. Of course, if you have enjoyed today's episode, please do remember to share this with all of your HR and L&D colleagues and friends. It's together as a community we can really raise the profile of the industry. And of course, I'd really appreciate any likes and reviews you can give as well. That really helps project and advance the show. And of course, if you are a regular listener to the show, please do remember to click subscribe or follow so you always get the latest episode as well. EQ isn't just about feeling better, it's about leading better. And we've got some fantastic leaders that listen to this show. So I hope you found the insights today helpful. And thank you once again, Dr. Robin Hills, for joining me on the HR L&D podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been brilliant.
Global teams are more connected than ever. But managing payroll, HR, and IT can still feel fragmented. Deel simplifies global work with one platform that keeps everything running smoothly. No compliance guesswork, no third-party payroll, just seamless operations backed by 24/7 expert support. That's why over 35,000 companies trust Deel to handle their global workforce. Visit deel.com/nickday to see how Deel can help. That's DEEL.com/NICKDAY. Deel, your forever people platform.